But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. And he prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish. For I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disaster. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. And the Lord said, Do you do well to be angry? Jonah 4, 1-4. In Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells the parable of two sons, better known as the parable of the prodigal son. It's about a wealthy landowner who had two sons. One day, the younger of the two sons goes to their father and says, Give me my share of the inheritance. This is a story that is familiar to most of us, so much so that we have a tendency to overlook this point. When does someone receive an inheritance? One receives an inheritance upon death. So then, what is the younger son essentially saying to the father? My life would be better if you were dead. Now, surprisingly, the father grants the son's wishes and gives him his portion of his inheritance. What does the son do? Well, he leaves his father's household. He goes away from the presence of his father, and he blows his inheritance on reckless living. As long as the funds are there, he is everyone's friend and living it up like a rapper, dropping all his father's capital on booze and bimbos, or if you will, crystal and strip clubs. However, that money isn't going to last forever when you're living on borrowed capital, and eventually he's living on fumes. Things go from bad to worse as a severe famine comes upon the land. He becomes so desperate that he hires himself out to work on a pig farm, and his hunger grows so severe that he longs to eat the pig food. FYI, if you're a good Jew, that's really bad, like rock bottom bad, like Joe Biden bad. In the state of his suffering and plight, surely some of his newly found entourage would come to help him, right? Nope. No one had compassion on him. But when he came to himself, which is to say, when he came to his senses, because sin makes you stupid, he realizes what a good master his father is and how well his father cares for his servants. He realizes what he had done to his father and how grievous his sin was. He decides to return home and tell his father, I am not worthy to be called your son. He goes home to repent, but while he was still a long way off, his father ran to meet him. His father has compassion on him and kisses him. He clothes him in the best robe and puts a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. His father clothes him in splendor. He even kills the fattened calf and breaks out the prince so that they can party like it's 1999. All that to say, they rejoice and celebrate exceedingly. For my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is now found. Jonah is a wayward prophet, and Jonah, as symbolic prophecy, represents the nation of Israel that was wayward. We began with the word of the Lord coming to Jonah, the son of Amittai. He was told to go to Nineveh. What does Jonah do? He does the exact opposite. He goes to not Nineveh, in the exact opposite direction, to the port city of Joppa, so that he can go to Tarshish, where there is no temple, no word from the Lord, no sacrifices, and none of God's people. Now you can run from God, but you can't outrun God. He appoints a great storm, and he uses this terror to save the pagan sailors, while Jonah is thrown overboard, sent to his death. God then appoints a great fish to swallow up Jonah. In the belly of Sheol, Jonah finally calls out to the Lord. The godly troublemaker exists to shine the light of Christ in the eyes of the idols of our day. We are able to do this because we are entirely listener-supported, which makes us cancel-proof and beholden to none. Your gifts of any amount support godly troublemaking and enable us to cut straight in a crooked world. Thanks for your support. The fish barfs out Jonah, And the word of the Lord comes to him a second time. He then goes to Nineveh and calls out against it. The Ninevites actually repent from the greatest to the least. And we have the greatest revival recorded in the scriptures. God relented from disaster. And how does Jonah respond? Well, for one, it was evil to Jonah, a great evil, and it burned him. Jonah is ticked and accuses God of evil for sparing the Ninevites. Jonah literally says, "Was not this my word when I was in my country?" This is significant because the phrase, "my word," is the same formula in Hebrew that God uses to speak of his own prophecies, his own word. Uri Brito points this out when he says, quote, "This theme of confrontation of two words of Jonah versus the Lord emerges as the theme of chapter 4, as the dialogue between Jonah and God continues. Note these facts from the Hebrew text. Jonah's first speech in chapter 4 has 39 words. God's last speech, which concludes the book, has 39 words. God's question in verse 4 has 3 words. Jonah responds with a question of his own in verse 8, and it consists of 3 words. God says 5 words in verse 9, and Jonah responds in the same verse with 5 words of his own. Jonah matches his word against the Lord's word for word. What is Jonah so ticked about? The nature of God. For I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disaster. Well, Jonah can't be ticked about this in principle. It was this same truth that delivered him from the belly of Sheol. Jonah was ticked that God will have compassion on whom he will have compassion. God blesses Jonah, and he thinks, this is great. God blesses others, and Jonah is disgusted and then wants to die. The prodigal had an older brother. The older brother is not concerned about his father's joy or the restoration of his younger brother. He is thinking only in terms of what it will cost him. So he is angry, and he refused to celebrate. And he said to his father, "Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." To which the father responded, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." The older brother is guilty of the same thing as the younger. Give me your stuff. He would rather have the blessings of the Lord than the Lord himself. He was just a lot more pious in the way he goes about it. When Jesus told this parable, it was the older brother that represented Israel. The thing that we need to understand about Jonah is that Jonah is not the younger brother in this story. He is the older brother. Both needed to repent. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media and all the places.